Welcome and thank you for joining us today for the New South Wales Small Business Innovation Research Program webinar. My name is Thomas and I'll be moderating today's webinar. I would like to begin by acknowledging that today we meet on many Aboriginal lands. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and we show our respect for elders, past, present and future. Some housekeeping before we start. Today's webinar is recorded and will be available on the New South Wales Sbir website in the coming days. If you would like to ask a question during the webinar, please type it into the Q&A box at the right-hand side of your screen. We will be answering as many of the questions as we can during the Q&A session, which is at the end of following the presentations. If we do not have time to get to all the questions during the webinar, we will answer any remaining questions and include the responses in the transcript available on the website. Please note that closed captions are also available, so click on the CC box at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. I would now like to welcome Carlos Marquette from R&D New South Wales, who will give you an overview of the Small Business Research and Innovation Program, followed by Yvonne Lee and Richard Tubb from Transport for New South Wales to talk about the challenge. Carlos, I will now hand over to you.
Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Carlos Marquette. I'm a manager at the Office of the New South Wales Chief Scientist and Engineer, and I'll be running you through the detail of the SBIR program before we discuss the specific SBIR challenge statement for today's webinar. At the end of today's session, there will be an opportunity to ask questions about the SBIR program and the SBIR challenge. The New South Wales Small Business Innovation and Research Program is an initiative of the New South Wales Government that provides competitive grants to small and medium-sized enterprises to find and commercialise innovative solutions to well-defined problems for New South Wales government agencies. The 2021 SBIR program will provide up to $12 million in grants to New South Wales SMEs to solve one of the 5 government challenges. The establishment of the SBIR program was recommended as a priority action of the Turning Ideas into Jobs, Accelerating Research and Development in New South Wales Action Plan. The action plan was developed by the Accelerating R&D in New South Wales Advisory Council, a group of leaders with experience in research, the innovation ecosystem, and government policy. The New South Wales SBIR program is modelled on similar successful Australian and international examples, including the Commonwealth Government's Business Research and Innovation Initiative, the SBIR program in the United States, and the Small Business Research and Innovation Initiative in the United Kingdom. The SBIR program is an important element of the New South Wales Government's approach to increase innovation and prosperity in New South Wales. Innovation generates the products and services crucial for future jobs and industries. Research and development undertaken in businesses and research organisations is a major source of innovation and should be supported for the whole community and the economy to thrive. The SBIR program has 2 main objectives. Number 1, to increase innovation in government by leveraging the capacity of New South Wales SMEs and R&D to solve government problems. And number 2, to increase economic development by driving jobs and industry growth and supporting the development of innovative products and services in New South Wales. There are 5 SBIR challenges for 2021. Proposed solutions must address one of the 5 challenges. Each challenge describes a current New South Wales government agency problem requiring an innovative solution. For 2021, the 5 challenges are the connectivity challenge, to increase the strength and resilience of communications networks in regional and remote areas. The hyperlocal navigation challenge, to assist passengers with vision impairments to access public transport services. The koala count challenge, to detect and quantify koala populations in New South Wales. The personal protective equipment challenge, to reduce waste associated with discarded PPE and sterile wrap. And the Water Purification Challenge, to reduce microplastic and other contamination in health facilities. Later in the seminar, we'll discuss today's challenge in more detail. The benefits for the SBIR program for participating SMEs include up to $1.1 million in grant funding to develop and commercialise a new technology or service. The opportunity to work with the New South Wales Government to pilot and test your solution. The potential for the New South Wales Government to contract you and procure your solution. And the opportunity, of course, to retain your intellectual property rights and the right to commercialise your solution and sell it in domestic and global markets. A successful SBIR program will also give the New South Wales Government access to innovative solutions to policy and service delivery challenges, insights into different problem-solving approaches through working directly with New South Wales SMEs. Our measures of success for the SBIR program are: number one, that more SMEs establish and grow their R&D activities and jobs in New South Wales. Two, that New South Wales SMEs translate more ideas into innovative products and services. And three, that the New South Wales Government agencies deliver better services to the New South Wales community by using these innovative solutions. I'll quickly run you through the timeline for the SBIR program. The SBIR program has 3 phases. Phase 1 is the feasibility study stage, where SMEs submit a proposal to solve one of the 5 SBIR program challenges. The proposals are assessed, with each successful applicant receiving a grant of up to $100,000 to conduct a feasibility study over a period of 3 months. Phase 2 is the proof of concept phase. Successful feasibility study grantees are invited to apply for the proof of concept phase. Applications are assessed, and each successful proof of concept grantee will receive up to $1 million to develop a proof of concept over a period of up to 15 months. Phase 3 is procurement, where New South Wales Government agencies who pose their challenges will consider purchasing successful solutions from participants. Not all SMEs will proceed through all stages, as it is a competitive process. As SBIR participants complete their feasibility studies and proof of concepts, the New South Wales Government agency and the SBIR team will work closely with them to provide advice and input and to help them to develop their solutions. This occurs via both formal monthly check-ins and updates to all participants, as well as informal interactions and assistance. At the conclusion of the program, participants are encouraged to take their solutions to other customers and other markets. The challenges have been specifically chosen so they encourage solutions that not only the New South Wales Government would consider procuring, but also solutions that could be commercialised and sold to other customers beyond the New South Wales Government. Applicants must meet the 5 eligibility criteria. For more information about the eligibility criteria and to view the full eligibility criteria, please refer to the 2021 New South Wales SBIR program guidelines, which are available on our website. Applications for feasibility study grants will be evaluated against the following 3 overarching assessment criteria. The technical criterion is worth 40 points, and there are 3 sub-criteria. A, to what extent would the proposed solution address the challenge statement, including the solution requirements? B, is the proposed solution ready to enter the feasibility study stage? And C, how is the proposed solution innovative and superior to what is currently on the market? The commercial criterion is worth 30 points, and there are 3 sub-criteria. A, does the proposed solution have commercial potential? B, given its commercial potential, does the proposed solution deserve public investment? And C, does the application provide a reasonable plan for the next steps towards commercialisation and adoption, including identifying potential barriers and how these will be mitigated? The final overarching criterion is the delivery criterion, which is worth 30 points. and there are 3 sub-criteria. A, does the company and project team have the appropriate skills and experience to carry out the project? B, does the team have access to the equipment, technology, infrastructure, and financial resources necessary to carry out the project? And C, does the application provide a reasonable project plan, including a budget, risk management plan, and performance measures? Each question in the application form states which assessment criterion it is being scored against. Try and respond as directly and succinctly to each question asked. There is a word limit for each question. We also ask applicants to submit some supporting materials, specifically a video presentation no longer than 3 minutes and a project budget. Applicants may also be required to provide profit and loss statements and balance sheets from the last 2 years. Eligible applicants will be assessed by both the New South Wales Government agency that proposed the challenge and an independent panel of experts with experience in business development, commercialisation, venture capital, and entrepreneurship. Applications are now open for the 2021 New South Wales SBIR program. Please read the guidelines before applying. The guidelines set out the program in detail, including the eligibility and assessment criteria, how we assess applications, how we notify applicants and enter into grant agreements with the grantees, how we monitor and evaluate performance, and the responsibilities and expectations in relation to this opportunity. You may wish to also consult the New South Wales SBIR FAQs available on our website. When you're ready to apply, you can download the application form from our website, and once complete, submit the form and supporting documents to the SBIR email address at sbir@chiefscientist.newsouthwales.gov.au. Applications close on Monday the 16th of August. Thank you for your time today. I'll now pass over to the Challenge Agency, who will talk through their challenge for today's webinar. At the end of the webinar, we will answer questions on the SBIR program in general and the specific challenge we are discussing today. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Yvonne Lee from Transport for New South Wales and within the Open Data and Innovation team.
And I am Richard Tubb from the Transport for New South Wales Open Data and Innovation team. Before we get into the Hyperlocal Navigation Challenge information for you today, we have prepared a short video as to what we've been doing lately at Transport.
Transport for New South Wales is embracing technology and innovation to provide better services for our customers. We've made it easier to use public transport, introducing contactless payments, the Opal digital card trial, and COVID-safe personalised journey plans. We've opened our data and are trialling transport systems powered by artificial intelligence and intelligent sensor technology to better manage and optimise our network operations. We've delivered connected and automated vehicle trials and on-demand transport options across New South Wales. We'll have a rapid transition to zero-emission buses, and our electric vehicle charging network will expand across New South Wales. We are putting in partnerships to ensure New South Wales is a world-leading adopter of connected and autonomous vehicles. Transport for New South Wales welcomes robust and diverse engagement with industry. We're partnering with some of the brightest minds across the world to make New South Wales a global leader in mobility. We're committed to increasing the pace of technology-charged innovation to deliver seamless mobility for our customers. Join us in driving a technology-driven transport revolution across our cities and regions. We're incredibly proud of what we have achieved.
So our challenge is to challenge you to provide a hyperlocal navigation technology solution in order to aid our customers to navigate our transport interchanges. The technology is not only going to provide assistance like generally, but also to customers with vision or other impairments who may find it difficult to navigate our public transport network. And the next slide, please. Yep. So our main problems, there are three key problems with our current interchanges. Firstly, we rely very much on what I consider static signage, so the signs that you see around our stations and interchanges, especially given that we often have changes in the network. So, for example, if there are delays on our for our trains or buses, or there's rain, etc., those signs can't change, and we can't provide any other information except in digital format. So at the moment, you might use a digital app, a mobile app, to get you updates, but there's no change to the signage. It's only really about the network changes. So for example, if you think about escalators or elevator outages, currently we're not able to provide that information, and so some of this hyperlocal navigation technology is meant to take that into consideration. And also from our accessibility point of view. So we've focused on this challenge very much on hyperlocal navigation, but one of the main use cases is for people with vision impairment. Currently, we do not provide very much in the way of assistance to them. They have to rely on their own means to get around our stations and our interchanges. And one of our areas of pain point is getting onto buses, for example. They're often customers with vision impairment will be waiting at a bus stop. They may know that there is a bus arriving, but they have no idea what bus number it is and whether or not it will get them to where they're trying to get to. And there's no way to flag a bus driver either. So there's quite a few issues there. So that's why we've focused for this particular challenge around people with vision impairment. But as you can understand, this goes way beyond just that use case. So I'll just talk through a couple of our previous trials, because there has been quite a bit of work that has been done previously to this particular challenge. We ran a trial in 2015 in Town Hall Station, where we put a network of Bluetooth beacons around Town Hall Station. At the time, there was a lot of work happening there to upgrade the station. So we were able to put the Bluetooth beacons out there. So in this particular case, they were Bluecats Bluetooth beacons, which were BLE ones, so Bluetooth low energy beacons. And we did a trial with a particular company that was developing an app called Wayfinder, and that provided A to B navigation. So we were able to give very fixed routes to people with vision impairment who would be using the app, and they were using bone conducting headsets in order to navigate from A to B. So they would actually be given very direct navigation things, like to say, walk 20 meters to the next, to the next, the elevator or the escalator or something like that. And so it was very, very direct navigation. But what we did in the next trial, so that's in Chatswood, we again put a whole host of beacons out, the same beacons, so again the Bluetooth low energy beacons by Bluecats throughout Chatswood Station and interchange. So that went beyond the station. It went to the station, it went to the bus interchange, it went to the Guide Dogs Australia office as well. So the beacons had a very, very good network. We also had one of the participants in the trials actually flew someone out to Australia and mapped Chatswood Station to a great level of detail and provided that information onto Openstreetmap, so other people could use that information in order to get really granular information about exactly what was in the area. And that trial, we also trialed what we call Audible Signage. So what that was being able to provide people with vision impairment information about what was ahead, to the right, to the left, etc. Similar to if someone was there reading a sign. Like if you've seen the signs that do tell that information It's actually trying to give that equivalency to people with vision impairment. And one of the really rewarding things being part of that particular trial was that Nicole from Guide Dogs Australia was saying that she walks past that to get to the office every day, and it wasn't until she did this particular trial she actually knew that there was a shop on the right hand side that sold, I can't remember what it was, but it sold a particular thing, and the information during this trial gave her that extra bit of information that she would never have known otherwise. So that was very, very rewarding, and that's the kind of thing we're trying to have as part of this challenge. And later on, I'm happy to take any questions about those two trials, as I was involved with both of those. So with regards to the solution requirements, most of this you'll find in the criteria and the documentation already available on the SBIR website, but I'll just rattle off a few of these to make sure that they're understood what we're looking for. So one of the key things is having really reliable customer information location. So one of the things that we did find during the trials by utilising Bluetooth as the main technology is that bodies of water and bodies, like as in a human body, would block the signal. So having a phone in the pocket, for example, would block the signal. So being able to have a reliable location of the device in this case, because it's not necessarily the person, but it's the device that the person is holding, is very important. So we've said ideally within 30 centimetre location. So one of the use cases there, for example, is being able to get customers with vision impairment, for example, to a bathroom and to a stall in a bathroom, one that is operational, one that might be an accessible toilet. Also being able to leverage existing data and infrastructure. Now, we do have quite a bit of data on it, the Open Data Hub, especially for things like real-time network changes. So being able to leverage that. Unfortunately, we do not have any beacons, so don't ask if we've got any beacons at the moment. We don't have any that we're managing. There might be beacons out there. I believe some of our advertising partners might have some beacons in their displays, but they're not accessible to us. And also making sure that you're aware of how the data is going to be considered from a privacy impact assessment point of view, because obviously location can be a quasi identifier. So just keep that in mind, and also making sure that it's a cost-effective and scalable solution. So I'll pass over to Richard to cover the next couple of slides.
Sure. So looking at what our goal is for the challenge. So really, it's all about the need for accessibility and equality, and getting that information of real-time information relating to wayfinding and navigation through our interchanges, and making that information available openly via our Open Data Hub, so that it can be ingested into other products such as customer-facing apps and digital products, and not just Transport for New South Wales products, but also third-party products too. So some of the points I'd like to make is that, and sort of clarify that, is sort of what exactly is it that we're looking for in terms of the goal. Well, we really need to have coverage at key interchanges. So that includes major train stations, and other key transport interchanges as well. So we're not looking at rolling it out across every part of the network, but it is at those primary key interchanges. We also want the technology to be highly accurate and also very, very reliable. So we need to be able to pinpoint user locations reliably, and as Yvonne had mentioned, to the point where we can direct someone potentially into a working toilet stall that is accessible. I mean, that's sort of the goal that we're aiming for. The data that's coming from whatever the system is, it needs to be non-proprietary and in an open format and license, so that we can reuse, so we can use that and make that publicly available. We also want to be able to have a simple developer integration, for example, via an API on our Open Data Hub. So it's an easy way for third-party developers to tap into that data and to tap into that system to be able to provide that hyperlocal navigation ability within their apps and their digital products. We also need the ability for Transport for New South Wales to be able to update the metadata. So that could be, for example, if a piece of equipment, a beacon, is repositioned, and we need to know exactly where that is, for example, in the station it's been moved to, or it could be that we need to update that there is something that beacon needs to alert to. It might be that, for example, that area is currently closed due to maintenance or something along those lines. So we need to be able to access to those in a very simplified way, whether that be for example, an interactive map that we, for example, have access to, that we can turn on or off, or change the criteria or the metadata for that particular beacon that potentially that is there. So depending on sort of how the system has been set up, but we do need a method, an easy way to be able to quickly update any of the information associated with the equipment that is doing the hyperlocal tracking. We also, as I mentioned before, we want any of the data that's coming from these to be made available, and also any appropriate data to be made available via the Open Data Hub. So when I say appropriate data, I mean data that we are able to share publicly, aggregate data potentially in the future as well, not just the data coming directly from those particular sensors at that particular moment in time. The technology that is chosen by you, it needs to have a long usable life. Obviously, we don't want to be changing it every 2 years. We want it to be able to have a longer shelf life than that, and also that the technology infrastructure will also need to be easily maintained, and have a minimal ongoing cost to be able to keep that technology in place. And if we just go to the next slide. So what are we looking at when we think of what will success look like for this particular challenge? So ultimately it will be a hyperlocal system or network for both indoors and outdoors that provides real-time update capability, as I said, of the metadata associated with each location point. For example, ladies' bathroom out of order in Central Station at this particular point. The data needs to be published and accessible on the Open Data Hub, with access for developers to integrate precise location features into their apps, and assisting customers in navigating major interchanges and train stations. Multiple apps, including accessibility-focused ones, will need to have integrated into the hyperlocal system to provide accurate and timely directions within the stations, including routing for platform changes and infrastructure or area closures, as I mentioned previously. The system needs to be highly accurate but privacy preserving. It also needs to be live and with the ability for us to grab historical position data to be shared within New South Wales and potentially shared via open data publicly. Other solutions beyond navigation could also use the system by leveraging the data provided by the hyperlocal system. As an example, this could include aggregate analysis of user movements on congregation for service optimization, or emergency requests with accurate location information for those particular enclosed environments. So these are the type of success factors that we would like to see brought to life through your particular solution. So hopefully you've got a good overview of the challenge, and we're now going to our Q&A part of the session.
Well, thanks so much, Richard and Yvonne, for running through that really brilliant presentation about the challenge, and also to Carlos for sharing the details on the SBR program. We are now also joined by Peter, Margaret, from Transport New South Wales as well, who will be on hand to answer all your questions. So please, if you have any questions, just throw them in the Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen. I think we might start answering them now. We got quite a few questions coming in already. So the first one is, what is Australia's view with reference to China's Beidou GPS system? Is this a national threat or any reason that our solution could be terminated due to national security consideration? I might throw this one to Carlos.
Thanks, Tom. So I'm not aware of what the Commonwealth Government's position is on that system. Of course, any proposed solution would need to comply with Australian government laws and regulations relating to national security, defence and cybersecurity. But I'd also note that we expect that GPS would probably be unlikely to provide the accuracy necessary for this solution, particularly because the solution must be functional inside buildings and underground.
Thanks, Carlos. Yu is asking, what about the range of the public transport services? And will the solution be able to cover all services, or should it just focus on one specific services like large metro stations? This seems like a question for transport.
Sure, I can take that one if you like. Yep. So that particular, it's meant to be across all our network. So trains, buses, ferries, light rail, metro. I think I just haven't missed any modes, but across all our modes.
Great, thanks. I got another question asking, is there a list of the key interchanges?
Yep. So the key interchanges would mainly be the city ones. So, you know, Town Hall, Central, Circular Quay, so the main city ones, as well as like Chatswood being a key one, Parramatta, Strathfield. Yeah, so we can get a more comprehensive list for you, but that would be the main ones.
Oh, thanks, Yvonne. I got another technical question for transport. So Steve is asking, do the location utilize a BRM system that is kept up to date for generating maps or 3D representations of the locations?
That is a very good question. And I know that we've done some impressive indoor mapping, especially around Central Station and the updates that are happening currently there. Those systems do exist, and they've definitely been highly detailed, highly accurate 3D maps of those stations that we have access to. They're not necessarily publicly available, but they are definitely around. In terms of the frequency in which it's kept up to date, we'll have to take that question on notice and sort of get back to you as to how often, for example, that gets updated, and also what is available, for example, for third parties to access. As a part of this challenge, though, normally what happens with it, with our innovation challenges, is that potentially you might be able to get access to additional systems and data that aren't publicly available. So that would be something that we would need to consider as a part of the proposal, and sort of determine what options we're able to provide to you. But we'll take that question on notice and put it up on the Q&A part of the website.
Thanks, Richard. Let's move on to the next one. So would you consider options that don't necessarily use Bluetooth and Bluetooth beacons? That's, yeah, Richard, could you answer that one?
You can take that one, Yvonne, if you like.
Yep, sure. Of course, we would consider it. During our formulation of this particular challenge, we were very careful not to indicate that we wanted any particular technology, because we know that technology has moved beyond Bluetooth. When we did the trials back in 2015, 2016, that was the technology that was available to us. We're very open to hear what other technology is available, and really it just needs to meet the other criteria that we've already posted.
Yeah, if I could just add to, probably the technology we're probably looking forward to is something that in 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 years time is still very useful. So as in if there's something that is currently cutting edge today that is just fits the bill perfectly, then that would be really great. It doesn't necessarily have to have wide adoption at this very moment in time, because this system is looking at developing for the future as well. So we'd be very keen to see sort of what are potential options, solutions that you come up with.
Great. We also got a question from David about the technology. So regarding the technologies will be used for the solution, are you willing to consider using some more new and emerging technologies like AI image processing, object detections, etc.? Consider users are willing to accept and use them?
Yeah. You go. Me? Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely, absolutely. I guess one thing to consider though is that getting access to existing systems such as CCTV is not guaranteed in any way, shape, or form. So the system really needs to be enclosed, within itself. That it's not reliant on using our current CCTV system, for example, at Central Station, and it may not be possible, or for there might be reasons why we aren't able to share that data. So this needs to be its own system, but very happy to look at other options, other technologies, potentially AI image processing that does that. Like, as I said, we're not saying it has to be Bluetooth beacons. We're not saying it has to be cameras. We're not saying it has to be anything specific. It's got to do with trying to address the needs and to be able to provide that hyperlocal option for customers.
And just keep in mind the privacy concerns around cameras and camera technology.
Thanks. I think it's naturally going to the next question about data. So could we reuse the Bluetooth spectrum data deployed in the station to develop the solution?
So as may or may not have been made clear, there is no Bluetooth network anymore. We had an existing network previously. We can definitely share what maps we had back then and where we placed the beacons. Like, we do have records of where they were, but we don't have anything beyond that.
Thanks. Next question from Jake. Could you elaborate on the Openstreetmap mapping of Chatswood? Who was the person and company who came from the US for this? I think this is a question for you, Yvonne.
Yeah, I can't remember the company that actually came out and did the mapping, but you'll see in OpenStreetMap, if you look at Chatswood, it's a lot more detailed than the other stations. And the reason for that is because this company flew somebody out from, I believe it was Germany that flew out. It might have actually been Mentz. I'm just trying to think who it was. It might have been Mentz who flew somebody out as part of the challenge. So can I just add to the challenge that we did in Chatswood in 2016, we did a component which was focused on accessibility needs, so people with vision impairment, but we also did a more broader beacon challenge where we, because we already had the network available, we invited other people who might have had different solutions utilizing the Bluetooth beacon network and showing us, demonstrating to us what other solutions could be in play. And that was one of the reasons Mentz participated in that innovation challenge and came up with a solution there.
Cool. I think let's move to the next one. So Jingguo is asking, this project is expected to kind of integrate highly accurate maps and wayfinding capabilities. So will you provide the highly accurate maps or the applicants need to create? I think this is a question for you, Yvonne, as well.
Yeah, I think this is one that it's part of the challenge. It's like, unfortunately, the maps that we have is limited. You'll see on the Open Data Hub what we can publish. Whilst we, someone mentioned earlier about the BIM type information, we're aware there is some internally, but there definitely wouldn't be the coverage that we would be wanting out of this particular innovation challenge, and would want it to be self-contained, as Richard was saying, sort of a self-contained ecosystem where the map and the data is provided as part of the solution.
Great, thanks. Next question. So what were the main blockers from the previous trials with the Bluetooth? So what prevented them from going to roll out with other stations? I think this question goes to you as well, Yvonne.
Yeah, sure. They were just trials, so the authority that we had in order to do them was just limited to rolling them out as a trial at Town Hall Station, and then when we did Chatswood, which was a totally brand new network, it was again just done for a trial, and we were asked to remove those Bluetooth beacons after the trial. So it was just an authority thing. If you understand how government agencies work, we were only authorised to have those beacons up for a limited amount of time.
Great. I think we got another question about data. So the question is, does our technology need to provide the data for all the bus rooms, escalators, extra, or is there already an API for that which have to implement?
Yep, there is data already available. So I'm just trying to see if I can find the actual question to make sure that I answer the question properly. But there is data available on the Open Data Hub for all of our facilities, and also our train timetables and bus timetables, etc., and also real time. So I believe all that data is available.
Yes, let's go to the next one. So the question is, in reference to the previous BLE trials, can we get the funds? So, and also, why didn't they work, or isn't it rolled out broadly? Just the water issue, or what are things different this time? Maybe this goes to one, yeah.
So I hope I mentioned a few of them, but one of the ones was just blocking, like in terms of infrastructure around the person. So even if there's a crowd in the station, that would block the signal. By putting it in your back pocket, it will block the signal, and it wasn't accurate to that granular level we needed. So if it's off by 50 centimeters, it could be quite dangerous potentially for people with vision impairment. And if it's not someone who's vision impaired, it just might give inaccurate information. So we just needed that better level of redundancy and accuracy that particular rollout didn't provide. Not saying that Bluetooth is not the answer, we don't know, but that particular trial did not give us the confidence that we could use like point-to-point navigation. That's why we're much more leaning towards something similar to what we consider the Audible Signage, which gives the equivalency of someone reading a sign.
Great, thanks. Let's move on to the next one. It's about the Bluetooth beacon as well. So the question is, for the beacons, is that something Transport for New South Wales will provide and install for the successful parties?
So no, the problem we're to the challenge that we're giving you is you come up with the technology, you come up with the network, you give us the data, we will host the data. And maintain the data ongoing, but we want you to come up with the solution. We don't need you to come up with the app necessarily. We really are after the data that will come from the network of, and I'm going to use beacons, but the things that will be scattered throughout an interchange, both indoors and outdoors, to provide granular navigational capability.
And also the means for us to be able to update that network. So, it's very easy, for example, with someone at the station to be able to access a system that they can use to say, this has happened right here, right now, and we need to make a change to that. So we can't be waiting hours, even many minutes, or to actually make the changes. We need to be able to make them, and those changes reflect on the network, in real time. There was also a question that we had from Tim there, Tim from Scapegoat, regarding the distance requirements. So we said 30 centimeters in terms of being able to pinpoint a user's location, and the question was that potentially Bluetooth may not be able to achieve that. Well, that was one of the things that we're not tied necessarily down to Bluetooth, and you might be absolutely correct that maybe it still can't do that, and there are other issues that Yvonne mentioned in terms of being able to broadcast the signal, and how that potentially there could be issues with crowds and things that could change that. But that was done quite a few years ago. But we're very much open to any other technology. But in terms of the distance, that is that stays. So that's the level of accuracy that we are trying to obtain.
Oh, thanks both. Let's look at the next one. So we are Ted is asking, like, we are looking at an outcome which offers this information like in 20+ languages. It's mentioned in the challenge statement document, but how important is that from your point of view? That's a question for transport.
Yeah, it's not necessarily to have it available in 20 language. I think that was one of the potential outcomes to the solution, is that when we have the data, like, so if we know the data is available in English, because that's our default language, then other systems and apps could process that and put that out in a different language. But one of the use cases is definitely being able to provide information in multiple languages.
Cool. Paul from Unity Technologies is asking, would access be available for the 3D data sets or later data or other scans, models, or key locations?
I think we've already answered that question. Unfortunately, we just don't have that level of information. There is information out there, and where we have it, we're happy to share it, that we're allowed to share, we will share it, but we just don't have that information. Like, we barely have, our own team barely have knowledge that we've got some 3D, models for Central Station at the moment. Like, that's the only one that I'm aware of. So sure they exist for other ones, but we're just not aware of them.
Cool, thanks. Question from Nathan. Would it be acceptable that a device required to be purchased by user to enable them access this kind of hyperlocal function, as the potential solution could solely rely on a mobile app?
I'm not quite sure of what that question's getting to, Nathan. You might have to, yep.
Yeah, I think the question is like, is it, if, for example, a customer were to potentially purchase a piece of equipment to use in that particular network, as opposed to, for example, their current phone that they have. I think the answer is, look, it would never get used if that was the case. So if we had to get our customers to buy a very specific piece of equipment, look, it could get used. Sorry, I'll pull back from that question, from that statement. But so it could, very specific users of it could definitely, it could definitely potentially be used. And in actual fact, I might get Peter to jump in there to save me from myself. But generally, we want it to be able to be used on sort of, I'd say generic devices. Peter, would you like to?
Yeah. I was going to say, because I think there's also a question. There's a question in there about costing from being covered by things like the NDIS as well, which is obviously looking from a personal perspective for a user, but. Yeah, absolutely. In terms of, I guess, getting the broadest reach in terms of the customer base that could be able to use a solution, devices like Richard was just saying, like your mobile phone would be a preference. But yeah, so keep that in mind in terms of when considering other bespoke technologies as well, about, I guess, that broad use case of who could use it.
Great, thanks. I think we have a question about the Sbir program. So how many feasibility studies will be funded by the program? I'll do it to you, Carlos.
Thanks. So there's no set number of feasibility studies that will be funded. We'll be looking to fund several feasibility studies, so there will be more than one, of course, but the exact number will depend on the number and quality of applications that we receive.
Cool. Let's go to the next one. This is an interesting question. So if our system is so good about privacy that there will be no user location data generated by the system at all, would that kind of count against the solution? I think this is a question for transport.
No, that would be great. Like, so what we're really after is the data on the location of the devices, not of the people. Like, so when I say devices, I'm talking the equivalent of the Bluetooth beacon. So what we want to have in our data store really is the location of the beacons and what the signal is and what is around that beacon. and how to determine the location of the things, not of the people. Hope that answers that question.
The aggregate data that we mentioned earlier, that is definitely secondary, as in if you have an amazing system that doesn't actually create any aggregate data, that recorded data that we can use, then it's not a deal breaker, from our point of view. It would be very interesting, having said that, to be able to have access to that, to see the movements from times of day and things like that, across where the network is available, but it's definitely a secondary use case.
Cool. Next question. Jenna is asking regarding about the trials already been done, like the wayfinding. So what kind of resources are available for potential applicants to access? Yvonne, do you want to grab that one?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, it's probably really just the maps of where they were and of the beacons where they were placed at the time, and the maps that we had internally that we could definitely share that. But in terms of the apps and things like that, that wasn't our IP, unfortunately, so we aren't able to supply that to anybody. Yeah.
Cool. There's another question about the challenge. So is it solution mainly for indoor-like environment, or kind of both for indoor and outdoor environment? That's a question for transport.
Yeah, it's both indoor and outdoor. So we want to cover the interchanges, but I mean, outdoor we have, at least there is some capability, usually using GPS to provide some sort of navigation, but there's nothing for indoor at the moment, like not on our network. So that's the focus, but that's only because we know that outdoor is already handled to some extent, but we don't want people to have to switch technologies, for example, to go from indoor to outdoor. We want it to be a very seamless experience for our customers.
Richard, I think you're on mute.
Yes, I am. Sorry, Peter, you might like to jump in, and if there's any sort of use cases with people with particular accessibility needs that, for example, that currently are underserved by navigation outside, or is there anything there that you might like to share?
I think the only thing to add was just what Yvonne was saying there around the seamless journeys. I think really keep that front of mind, and that even that connection between modes. It's certainly something that we get a lot of feedback regarding navigation, in terms of when, say, someone might get off a bus and be trying to navigate to a platform at a train station or to the train station. It's sort of crossing those interchange, and particularly in those those areas where we might be going between modes, that is particularly difficult, where, say, we might not have currently a lot of existing queues. And so for people with vision impairment, that really then comes down to them actually learning a particular environment, either through guidance or just through, I guess, that everyday movement that they might make. So I guess it's really about that benefit, that whole of journey benefit, to think about from this perspective, because that, I think, will be a real game changer here, particularly for people with vision impairment.
One other example that we can use for people with vision impairment, but also just for anyone else who's travelled to Central Station and had to have a platform change, and then to follow, which mysterious tunnel to get you to the next platform. It's not necessarily the easiest thing to do, and so if we were to be able to say that it's definitely this staircase, or it's definitely this elevator, and then you turn right through this weird tunnel, and then all of a sudden you're going to get to where you need to go. That would be great, because that is actually something that is quite tricky for the best of us. Even trickier if you have an impairment and not be able to to see everything potentially around you.
Exactly, and I think Central Station is a really good call out, because it does change so much, either whether there is, say, construction, or stairs might be closed, or there are sort of even changes in the path that someone might use, or it could be, again, what we were talking about in terms of the service disruptions, or whether there's track work and things like that as well. That can really pose a real barrier for people's confidence in using the network, particularly if that is not planned. And which it happens on a daily basis. So yeah, I think, you know, looking at somewhere like Central is kind of has it all in a way, because, you know, it's obviously got the interchange elements, but also it is a constantly changing space as well. And certainly from our peak bodies that we do engage with, we get a lot of feedback about sort of those changes and keeping people, I guess, informed equally around those changes when they occur.
I thought I'd just mention here, because I don't think we've mentioned it previously, but if you are vision impaired, often you get training on how to use certain navigational tools that are available, especially tactile. So in our network, on our train stations and at bus stops, etc., you'll feel on the ground that are these what they call tactiles. There are directional tactiles, the ones that have got like lines, and then there are just the dots, and they mean different things. The directional ones provide some directional guidance, and the dots are really usually warning to, you know, indicating that you're near a platform edge or a step edge, etc. So just keep that in mind. If you're not aware, please do read up about them.
Yeah, so I guess, you know, it's to that enhanced journey that I think something like solving this problem has the ability to help resolve, because just as Yvonne said, there are tools that people with vision impairment already use, like tactiles, shorelines, so walls and things like that as well. But yeah, training is also an important part of people learning to use the transport network as well. But this really has an ability to create, I guess, you know, a next level of independence, but it is very likely that someone with vision impairment will be using something like the solutions that are developed through this trial. Use that solution in conjunction with those elements that Yvonne just mentioned. So it's not that they're not going anywhere; they will always remain as your basis for your navigation. This is kind of that enhancement, and I guess that's something really beneficial to partner with the way that someone already uses our network.
Great, thanks so much for answering that one. That's quite comprehensive. Let's move on to the next one. So Constance from Skeko is asking, to what extent do you want the system to provide guidance for mixed model trips, such like taxi and Uber assisting to the station or bus hubs? It's an interesting question. So I do to transport for any takers.
Hi, Klaus. So yeah, it really is just meant to provide as much guidance as you can, really. But what we're after is the data, more so than like as in the data of what is where, as opposed to yeah. So I'm sure that the Skeko solutions, that like the apps that you have, like TripCo, can provide that guidance. But if you imagine, what data do you require in order to provide the granular information to provide exact, you know, information of how to get from the light rail platform through to the taxi stand and into the cab? That's really what we're after, is that really granular level of information.
And then feed into that the escalators are down, that type of thing. What do you do now? Like, it's not the standard path that you want to take, because Central's being, you know, added to and changed. So all of a sudden there needs to be an alternate route. So at the moment there's no easy way. You might be able to do a plan even through a station potentially, but there's no easy way to find out, oh, this elevator or escalator is no longer in, we can't use that as a part of this plan. How do we reroute someone and show them where to go when that's not available? And obviously normally what would happen is you'd see a sign that hopefully you don't fall over, and you see this is where to go, like this is the new direction in which you head. But really what we'd like to do is that's assuming that you can see the sign and interpret the sign. So we need to assume that they can't see the sign and they can't interpret the sign. Great.
I think we might have time for one more question. So let's go to David from N2N AI is asking, if the project is successful, so do you think we can roll out to the rest of the network, not only for the specific locations? Yvonne or Richard?
Yep. Sure, I think that's part of the whole reason of running an SBIR is to prove that it can be successful in our key stations, and then roll out further where we can. So, yeah.
And as far as I'm aware, and this is more probably a SBIR related question, but the commercial agreements sort of come after that point in terms of ongoing and sort of what can be achieved from a partnership or ongoing agreement point of view, commercial agreement.
Cool.
So,
thanks.
As far as I know, jump in to explain it further if you want.
No, that's right. Yeah. So the phase 1 feasibility study is the initial phase where you demonstrate the kind of feasibility of the solution and that it could and probably would work. And phase 2 is around the proof of concept. So developing and trialing that potentially in 1 or 2 locations to demonstrate that it actually works in practice. And then phase 3 is related to procurement. So that's the stage in which you'd consider, wider rollout of the device or system across the Transport for New South Wales network. And post the program as well, it's important to think about other applications for the technology in other environments. So, commercial buildings, other public buildings. There would be lots of commercial applications for a product like this. And post the program, we really encourage you to do that, and we can provide support as well to assist you with that.
Great, thanks all. And I think we might need to wrap up at this point. So thank you everyone for attending. If you would like to find more information about the SBIR program, to download the application form and the challenge statements, these are all on the SBIR program website. A recording of this webinar will also be available on the website with a transcript of questions and answers in the coming days. So if you need to ask any further questions or our contact email address is sbr@chiefscientist.newsouthwales.gov.au, which is on the screen. So thank you again and wishing you all the best.